Let's bring into the conversation now our friend with the Messenger, senior legal analyst and reporter Adam Klasfeld. And Adam joins me. Adam, good to see you. Thanks for coming on yet again. There's still so much to get to. I guess my first overall impression today, after the now second tranche of these documents and names have been released, is that, yes, there are some new names that had somewhat of associations with Epstein. But the names we already knew, it seems like we have more damning details about the natures of those individuals with Epstein. Is that kind of your assessment here?
I would say that's a fair assessment. Not only, as you mentioned, a remark that Ms. Schoberg said that Epstein made of former President Clinton, saying that he likes them young. There was another revelation that was just unsealed today, an allegation made by Virginia Giuffre that Clinton allegedly threatened Vanity Fair not to write about his good friend Jeffrey Epstein. That was the allegation made by Ms. Giuffre back in an email more than a decade ago. So that's an example of one of the things. And going back, as the lead-in to the segment mentioned, there was the mention of former President Trump's casino. That apparently happened in the context of Ms. Schoberg apparently being told by Epstein, I'll call Trump to arrange this trip to this casino. So it was very clear, and this was clear to anyone who was watching. You know, I covered Ghislaine Maxwell's trial when it was playing out in New York in federal court, and it was very clear that Jeffrey Epstein used his access to powerful people to build trust, to build fear with the young women and girls in his orbit. And it was part of what expert witness described as the grooming process. So that's another piece of this puzzle going on here, that the big names that he's associated with were his ways of burnishing his power over the girls and women in his orbit and showing that he's a powerful, influential figure. So there is this uncomfortable and embarrassing spotlight on these figures. Yeah. But these figures themselves are also used as part of his own motives to get them into his orbit.
Yeah, and in no way am I trying to diminish the horrible crimes Epstein made, but that's a tale as old as time. Wealthy people know wealthy people. Wealthy people get other wealthy people to do things for them. They can easily get someone on the phone. And so it seems to me there's like this weird spectrum of varying degrees of the relationship these individuals had with Epstein. And to me, I'm trying to grapple with where is that line where it kind of veers and fends off into, well, they were a really close associate and they had, questionable things happen with some of these girls in Epstein's orbit as well. It seems like we're on the precipice of maybe Bill Clinton moving into that place on the spectrum here. This is just trying to kind of wrap my head around all of these relationships and the nature of them, because there's a lot to get to.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, there was one other document that was unsealed today that alleges, from the point of view of an unidentified Jane Doe 3, I believe, that it makes the allegation that that a girl was trafficked to powerful people for purposes of blackmail. That is something that has been long speculated. It's not something that had been said in a document, and even given voice to with any kind of public record until very recently. There was reporting in the Wall Street Journal, for example, that Bill Gates was allegedly blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein with the exposure of an affair if he didn't enter into some sort of financial relationship with him. So in terms of what was the purpose of these relationships with powerful people, was Jeffrey Epstein, as this document would allege, trying to blackmail certain people? Were they just a way that Jeffrey Epstein could talk up his power, talk up his influence in order to essentially put these girls under his orbit and make them victims and make them believe that he was more powerful than he actually was. We're learning more of that with every release. And as this segment began, you made perfectly clear we're nowhere near over. This is a rolling series of releases. Every new series of releases seems to bring more sunlight. There's new litigation that happens as a result of it very often. We've seen that happen. And we'll see what the ramifications, what the aftershocks of this one are.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That was my next question here. We were kind of talking amongst ourselves in the newsroom here. The Epstein saga continues, but what will any recriminations look like, if any, at all, to some of these people who we know had relations with Epstein, who were friends or close associates with Epstein, and then other names we didn't know at all? I'm talking about former New Mexico governor, recently passed Bill Richardson, Michael Jackson, David Copperfield, Stephen Hawking. That really, I think, threw a lot of people for a loop yesterday as well here.
Well, a lot of these names actually, I'll go back to Bill Richardson. His name has actually been in the mix before in some of this unsealing, and it goes to the wide orbit of this. And what we're learning about David, what we're getting now is a lot of nuance and a lot of detail. And the remark from David Copperfield attributed to him there is chilling in light of what we know of how the Jeffrey Epstein saga operated. It's been called a pyramid scheme of abuse, where the way that it went was one of the girls who he would recruit for quote unquote massages would be paid to find other girls who would again fall into this cycle of abuse. And that's how it got that reputation of being a sort of pyramid scheme. So we're getting the names, some of them known, some of them, as you mentioned, very either peripheral to it or unknown entirely. And we're finding out more details, some of which had been speculated about, some of which are still, frankly, a little they're without definitive and leaving more avenues for further research.
Yeah, Adam, what's so interesting, kind of tangentially to this story this week, you see kind of some of these, minor headlines popping up about powerful people, wealthy, influential people, especially in the entertainment sector, kind of accusing their foes in the media of being on the list. I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Kimmel. Also, we've seen some other instances of that as well. What do you make of that? It seems like this has become kind of like a cudgel for very powerful people to go after those that they don't like, to say, you're on the Epstein list, even though it's a complete fabrication. Did you anticipate that?
Well, that has been going on for years, if not more than a decade. And that's why I always try to inject a note of caution here, that we call it the list, right there. But we need to make clear, and you've made clear from the outset, this isn't a client list. This is a list of documents, primarily, where identities have been unsealed, of people who are connected in some way to Jeffrey Epstein or to the plaintiff in this lawsuit, Virginia Giuffre, the survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. And this is a part of an unsealing of information that has happened for a long time that needs to be poured over, responsibly contextualized, knowing that very often the reason for this cultivating of ties with the powerful was to foster this image of influence and to continue this cycle of abuse.
Yeah, and of course, no one is, debating that the abuse actually occurred in droves here. But Adam, just to be fair, does it give you pause, or does it give a lot of reporters pause who cover this so closely, that with all of these documents that were released over the last 48 hours, most of it is testimony from Virginia Giuffre and a lot of the victims, kind of offering their horrible experiences and the very, very powerful people that came within striking distance of them. And I'm not trying to, cast aspersions on the victims by any means, but the one-sidedness of that, does it give us pause, or should we look past that?
Well, I think every journalist, when we find out one person's testimony, one person's story, we try to find out the details. We try to find out the response of the people who are named in this document. We try to tell the full story, and that sunlight is the best disinfectant is the famous quote. That by bringing it all out there, I'm a firm believer that the bringing out of sunlight and information brings out more transparency. It enhances the public understanding, and we can get to the bottom of it, because fewer stories have engendered the amount of public interest, the amount of, frankly, speculation, and calls for careful, responsible journalism as the Jeffrey Epstein saga, in light of the history of abuse, in light of the history of the powerful people who have been linked to it. It calls for probing journalism and careful, responsible journalism.
Yeah. Adam, just lastly, this is going to last for days. What do you have your eye on tomorrow?
It's one of the interesting things about the releases is it's happening in a way that we don't know what to anticipate.
Sure.
We just wait for the document, and then we try to make sense of it. We try to harken back to, in my case, I've covered a number of the court proceedings that have helped me understand the ways in which I understand what these victims have said in the past, what some of the people associated with the case have said in the past, and how it enhances a decades-long developing understanding.
All right. Adam Klasfeld, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for your time. Talk soon.
Talk soon. Thank you for having me.